Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Favorite Guitar Solos. Today, we're going to talk all about one of the greatest players ever to walk this earth from Canada, Mr. Frank Marino. And I decided, who better to bring on to talk about Frank Marino than two guys that I know for a long time. We've got two Sea Tranquility alumni, two guys that know Frank Marino personally, Mike Blackburn and Ryan Sparks. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hey, how are you doing, Pete?
Great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Well, so Mike and I have been talking about doing a show for a while. And then when we finally settled on this, Mike was like, really, let's get Ryan on to do this show. Because for those of you who don't know, the Frank Marino Live at the Agora box set that came out. God, when did that come out again now? Was that late last year? I'm losing track of time.
August last year.
August last year. Okay. So that wonderful book that comes in that set, a good chunk of that book is written by Mr. Sparks himself. So, who better than to get on this show? This three guys here who love Frank Marino. We all know him. So we decided, all right, so let's go through his catalog and try and pick out our favorite guitar solos. Not an easy feat because there's a lot of albums. There's a ton of great guitar solos. Arguably every guitar solo and every song and every album is fantastic. But more importantly, there's a treasure trove of live stuff. So I gave Ryan and Mike free rein to choose from whatever they want. So we have each picked our 10 favorites. And we're going to start off, let's see, we're going to go Mike, Ryan, myself, and continue going round and round and round until we get to number one. So, Mr. Blackburn, why don't you kick us off with your number 10?
All right, number 10 for me, Ain't Dead Yet, Power of Rock and Roll. A furious pentatonic display if there ever was one. It's relentless and nonstop, and it's one of Frank's more energetic performances, and believe me, he has plenty of them to choose from. So that's my number 10, Ain't Dead Yet.
There you go. All right, Ryan, you're up.
Number 10, I went with Avalon from Eye of the Storm, Frank's last studio album. It's like this bouncy sort of jazzy instrumental composition, reminds me a little bit of like Poppy in a way. In the construction of, the first couple of minutes are divided to developing like this theme, and then the solos begin, and it's a truly unique track also in the sense that it's the only song to date that I know of where actually Frank trades off solos with himself on the organ and the guitar. So that's kind of one of my favorite tracks off of that album, which is an amazing album from start to finish. Frank's last studio record, but that's my number 10 is Avalon.
That's a good choice. I was looking at that one and considering it. And that's a great album too. I think people forget how great that album is, or maybe they just never listened to it because it came so much later after everything else, but really underrated album. I think that's a great choice. So you went with the most recent one. I decided to go way back for my number 10 and give a little love to the early catalog. Funky Woman from Maxum. Okay, so Maxum is that guy right there. Killer solo, a little bit different. So, Frank's kind of tones shifted a bit through the years, but back then on this album, especially on this solo, heavy fuzz tone, didn't always go that route, but I think it's really cool. And I think on this solo, he's kind of showing all that he can do without getting too speedy, right? It's not like a Fast and Furious solo. It's kind of funky. And of course, as this whole album is, and the first couple albums, just absolutely dripping with psychedelia, which is, he was really big into early in his career, although he really always has been a psychedelic guitar player. But I think if you want something a little bit different from him, definitely check out Funky Woman from Maxum. I love the fuzz tones on that solo. So that's my number 10. Back to Mike.
Number 9 for me is a track that many probably have not even heard. It's called Hinkston Nights, and it's from the remastered From the Hip album. It's a more languid tune than Frank would generally do, but it's steeped in jazz and all those unorthodox type things, combining jazz and rock that Frank can do. It runs at a paltry 16 minutes, which is a short tune by Frank standards, but there it is. For those that already have the From the Hip album, I definitely recommend getting the remastered version with the bonus track because it's well worth the ride.
Good choice. Yep.
Yep. That's called thinking outside the box, Mike. Love it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I guess number 9 is for me would be, I picked A New Rock and Roll from the live album 78. And I chose this version of the track, nothing against the studio version that was originally featured on his second album, Child of the Novelty, mainly because he just takes that solo, that original solo, and just obliterates it live, like Frank often does with a lot of his stuff. It's just a relentless, blazing onslaught at warp speed. It concludes with some pretty crazy whammy bar abuse to finish it off. And again, it's nothing against the original solo that was on that album, but I found with those first couple of albums that Frank was still kind of feeling his way, like in the studio with his live stuff. And so much of his stuff, like you mentioned, Mike, so much of his stuff translates better in the live arena. And I think this is just a good example of that.
I will say his tone on that live album is probably some best tone of that decade.
Killer. Yeah.
And yeah, he took every song and just amped it up a notch on that. I love that live album so much. It's so great. Well, I'll definitely be talking about that as we're kind of going on here. Let's see, number 9 for me. How about Stay With Me from The Power of Rock and Roll from 1981? I mean, this whole album just kicks ass completely. But here, ultra tasty notes here. The tone is metallic yet quite funky. It's blistering hard rock, as this whole album is. Loads of wah-wah on this solo. I'm a wah-wah sucker. I love anything. Anytime anybody steps on a wah-wah pedal, I'm listening. I overuse it myself. It's a really quick, speedy solo, yet it's just gut-wrenching. And like I said, it's just got that tone to die for. I love his tone throughout this entire album. And Stay With Me, Power Rock and Roll is my number 9.
Well, I'm going with the first of my live choices. I limited myself to 3. It was very difficult to do. But this one coming in at number 8 is King Bee from Frank Marino and Mahogany Rush Live. If you talk to the guys who name drop Frank, and I'm talking about the players now who love him, Zach, Steve Vai, Marty Friedman, that's the song that really blew their socks off, along with his version of Johnny B. Good, which of course is amazing. I mean, the whole album is amazing, but I'm guessing that that's the song that really showed the rock blues side of Frank and just how potent he was. And it's a killer.
That's one of those handful of live albums in the 70s that should have been a double, right?
You bet.
Yeah, it was going to be a double album, right? So we got 3 tracks that didn't make it onto that double album with Poppy, Look at Me, and Strange Universe, which was originally supposed to make up the rest of that album. So,
well, Poppy from that era would have meant it would have had to be a triple album.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. True.
20 minutes, 25 minutes at least.
True.
Right?
Yeah, Strange Universe is another one that comes in quite long too. So back to me, I guess, for number 8, I went with The Answer. But again, from the live album, seems like the live album, the 78, is getting some love here early on, I guess. But again, another example of, how Frank takes what is already an amazing song, just revs it up in the live setting. Things heat up when he lets out that scream just before the final verse, well, I'm old and tired and cold. And you could just hear the firecrackers going off. It's just the ambience in that live arena, and he just goes back and, he does this really cool sounding solo, returns to the overall theme, and then finishes off with like this 30-second, like face melting solo section that just, ends the track and brings it to a conclusion. It's killer.
That was in my original top 10. And it got bumped for something else. And now I'm like, oh, how could you not include it? I'm glad you did, though, because that's a very noteworthy one right there. Yeah, I love it. All right. My number 8, He's Calling from Eye of the Storm from 2000. This is one of those long, and, it's almost like I mean, this is a studio album, but this particular song, it's got like one of those, I mean, what is it, 4 minutes long, the solo, 5 minutes? I don't even know. It's really long. It's spiraling. It's got nice clean tones. You got some nice delay effects on there. And then he starts using all those Middle Eastern scales, just absolutely magical stuff. Stunning, really. And of course the lyrics to the song have all sorts of, spiritual meaning and what have you. But I just love that he just takes you on this long ride through all these different tones and styles and all these different scales, just absolutely amazing stuff. And that's, and then if you ever heard live versions of that, just takes it even further. But I totally love it from the studio album. So he's calling my number 8.
That's a good choice. I had that in my original, and it actually got bounced out at the 11th hour, but
it happens. Every one of these shows I do, that happens. It's like, oh.
Exactly. Good choice.
We're down to what, number 7?
Number 7.
So my number 7 is another live choice, and this could have been any of the live versions of this song, and I'm talking about Poppy. I expect we're going to hear Poppy again in this list somewhere else, but in my case, the first Poppy I heard was, of course, the double live album. And I mean, that one and the one on Real Live are interchangeable in terms of length and sound. I would say Real Live is probably a little better recorded, but it's just, this is the best of Frank. He takes a tune, he works a lot of other well-known riffs and tunes into it, and it goes on and on, but it's never boring.
Nope.
And he keeps returning the cycle and coming back to it, and it's a favorite. Will always be a favorite. So that's mine, Poppy.
Great choice.
Yeah, definitely. My choice for number 7 is Something's Coming Our Way off of What's Next. Again, what a killer album from start to finish, but what's not to like about, this track that kicks off that album? I mean, it's basically a 1.5-minute song with a 5-minute guitar solo. It's like absolutely relentless in its attack. It has all of Frank's trademarks in there. It's well constructed, done in 2 sections. There's like this brief moment where the listener gets a little bit of a, chance to get their bearings before the first and second solos. And it's just super melodic, clean, crisp, and tons of speed in there. Absolutely killer song. My number 7.
I agree. More about that in a few minutes, I think. Let's go to the What's Next album from 1980. You Got Livin'. Great song. Always dug this a lot. Again, talk about that monstrous tone. It's all over this album, and specifically this particular song and solo. This is big, ballsy, hard rock and Frank Marino, blazing throughout the whole second half of the song. I mean, it's almost like the whole second half of the song is a solo, and it's just absolutely, like you mentioned before, Ryan, face melting. And a lot of these solos are exactly that. It's just, you listen to it and you're like, holy crap, did I just hear what I just heard? Yes, you did. That's what Frank Marino does and does so well. So You Got Livin' from What's Next is my number 7.
It's like those old Memorex commercials, the ad where the guy's sitting in the chair with his hair being like blown back and he's in front of the, that's how you feel sometimes in front of Frank's guitar when he's cranking off these face melting solos.
Yeah. And if you had a chance to see him live, it's just unbelievable. It's almost like too much, but too much in a good way, right?
Right.
You're like, okay, we're at now hour number 3 and there's no letting up here, and I'm loving every second of it, right?
Hour number 6 in Cleveland.
Exactly.
So actually more than that, because there's a lot of material that didn't make the DVD. Frank hopes to put some of that out on a CD at some point. I don't know if that's still in the plans, Ryan. You've talked to him more recently than I have, but
Haven't heard anything.
So my number 6, He's Calling from Eye of the Storm. Another one of those relentless Frank tunes. It's almost hypnotic, the way the drums work with the general tune. And it's one of those songs he'll always do live as long as he's doing Mahogany Rush or Frank Marino material. It's just one of those great songs. And again, it's laced with those lyrics of a spiritual nature that you referenced earlier, Pete. Spirituality is a big part of Frank's life, and it's come through in the last 2 decades of his career a lot, big time. So that's my number 6, He's Calling.
All right, back to me for numbers. So my number 6, Strange Universe. So the question is here, which one do you take? Because do you take it off of Real Live or you take it off of the Agora? The first time this track was, ever heard on an official live album was on, of course, Real Live. With, like I said, should have been on that first live album in '78. But what a stellar performance this is. So I took the one off of Real Live. Frank just pulls out all the stops during the 10-minute plus Ode to Creation section, as he uses just some pretty good, cool volume and delay effects to great effect, which is, it just ends up being like a psychedelic guitar fan's wet dream, that song. It's incredible. And for me, it was a real hard choice to pick between, the two existing versions that are out there. The Agora one is a longer, and but I went with the one from Real Live. I just like that one because I heard that one first, I think, and that was just kind of like, yeah, that's my choice on that. So yeah,
can't go wrong with that one. Can't go wrong. All right, Requiem for a Sinner from World Anthem.
Nice.
Now, you mentioned psychedelia, right? I mean, this solo is insanely psychedelic. I think if you're a lover of like any of the Jimi Hendrix stuff, even like some of the Uli John Roth from those early Scorpions albums, it kind of similar vibe here. It's kind of funky too, but man, you listen to this song on headphones when he's soloing, to hear all those screaming notes panning left to right, back and forth. It's just really, really brilliant stuff. And I absolutely dig it. So Requiem for a Sinner from World Anthem.
Okay, number 5. Number 5 for me is another lesser known tune. Probably lots of listeners have not even heard of it. It's called Babylon, and it's from an album. It's an instrumental from an album called Guitar Speak, Volume 2. So there is another Babylon revisited on, I believe it's From the Hip, I'm not sure. But this version is all instrumental. It's one of those building tunes that has a lot of those Eastern influences that you mentioned before, Pete. It's hypnotic. The guitar playing is stellar. It's one of my favorite Frank tracks of all time. So those who have never heard it, do yourself a favor. You can see it on YouTube. There's a great video done with the Tower of Babylon. So have a look. It's a great song.
I don't think I've ever heard that, so I'm going to have to check that out.
Yeah, that's a good choice. That's definitely one of the lesser known nuggets in Frank's catalog for sure. Good choice, Mike.
Cool. All right, Ryan, what do you got?
Number 5, It's Begun to Rain from the Agora. I had to get this one. And the great thing about this DVD is that Frank pulls out all the stops. He reaches deep into his catalog over the course of this event that he did. He's playing songs that have rarely or never been performed before. And, It's Begun to Rain is exactly one of those tracks, which he probably did in '76 when the album came out. And I guess it was kind of dropped live. So the original studio version runs like, 6.5 minutes and has this great jazzy outro solo to it that unfortunately fades out and leaves the listener sort of kind of wondering, where this is going to go and wanting more. But, due to the limitations of vinyl back in the days, that was the norm. So on the amazing live rendition of this, we finally get to see, Frank spread his wings, so to speak, and just give this one the spectacular solo that it deserves. And it's a gorgeously funky, jazzy solo that runs, I think, somewhere around like 5 minutes or something like that. I mean, it's just amazing. And, again, a track that's not performed live hardly ever, but a great track, a great studio track off of the 4 album, just given an amazing treatment here on the Agora live version. That's my number 5.
Good choice. Good choice. All right, speaking of live, I'm going to go to the 1978 album for my next pick, which I had to put Dragonfly on this list somewhere. It's just a really lyrical guitar solo. You got a little bits of funk, you got psychedelia. His notes are absolutely screaming throughout this entire solo. And again, that got a reiterate the tone of his guitar on this album. I mean, you know, I was just thinking about it while we've been talking. So, you know, he's basically played like an SG or SG style guitar throughout his entire career. Has there ever been another player who has kind of gotten these type of sounds out of an SG? Most people think of an SG as, you know, Tony Iommi and Angus Young, right? He doesn't sound anything like that. It's like he's doing stuff on this SG, which normally we'd see Strat players do. And I think that's a testament to, you know, just basically the fingers, the amps, the effects he uses. I mean, just incredible, incredible stuff. And yeah, Dragonfly, mesmerizing song. Absolutely love it.
Great track. Yep.
Okay, for number 4, I'm going way back to another lesser known tune called Once Again off Strange Universe. It's a whimsical little song that's about a couple, and it goes through their life cycle. It's quite humorous when you actually sit down and listen to the lyrics. But in that song is the first time Frank displays his jazz licks, and he's got jazz licks, let me tell you. It just about knocked me out of my chair the first time I heard it, because it was so opposed and different to anything he'd ever done up to that point. And I was surprised and amazed. And I mean, Frank never ceases to amaze me. I mean, the first time you hear the pseudo slide that Frank plays, you say, what? How does he do that? And, you know, for those that like tapping, I mean, we talked about Ain't Dead Yet. There's lots of tapping in that tune, and that's way back in the earliest of Van Halen times. So Frank had a pretty complete arsenal, and he pulls it out. And this is the first time that he kind of pulled it out for me. Cool. So that's once again, Strange Universe.
So my number 4, I went to the Power Rock and Roll album, which again, a killer album from beginning to end. Much like that string of albums that he was doing, What's Next, Power Rock and Roll, Juggernaut, all in that time period. But the song that I picked off of this one was Go Strange. Just high octane from the searing opening riffs. You can tell this is going to be like, you know, something out of this world. And Frank doesn't disappoint. You know, by 2 minutes, he's basically said all he has to say, and it just, the next 4.5 minutes are just an excuse to let loose with this barrage of, like you were mentioning, wah-wah, Pete, and it's just like this one is just one of those wah-wah drenched solos. Over top, like let's not, you know, let's give credit where credit is due over this funky rhythms laid down by Paul Harwood and Jimmy Iommi, just that trusty rhythm section. You know, just a crazy track off of an album which again is full of guitar riffs and full of great solos. So that's my number 4, Go Strange from the Power of Rock and Roll.
Yeah, it's definitely a guitar album.
Yeah,
to say the least, right? As all these are, but yeah, that one especially. All right, Mike mentioned a little while ago that he was pretty sure that we were going to be talking about Poppy again. So my number 4 is Poppy, and I decided to go with the Double Live album. I was listening to both this and the real live version side to side, and then I remember how good the Agora one was. I'm like, oh, I got to make a decision here. And I think, Ryan, you mentioned that you went with the one you heard first, right? So I decided to go with the one from this album. It's a little more compact, all right? But, you know, and Mike also mentioned before how Frank occasionally lets the jazzy side come out, and I think you hear that in this one right here. It's blazing, but it's very tender at times. It's very tastefully done, very melodic, and it kind of takes you on that looping ride as only Frank can do, and it's just completely dazzling. And yeah, I remember the first time I heard Poppy from this album, I was like, holy crap, that's not like the Frank we're used to hearing, but I like that a lot, and I've loved Poppy ever since. So my number 4 is Poppy.
And what's that on that album? Is that like 11, 12 minutes, something like that? That's like Frank keeping it pretty
10:38. So that's kind of
keeping it pretty tight for that song.
Yeah.
You know, considering the last time we saw Frank out there in 2010, you know, you were getting 30-minute versions of that song. So yeah.
It is economical Poppy, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
It's the casino circuit version. That's what it
is.
I think when I saw Frank at BB King's in New York City, Poppy was probably close to a half hour long, I would think. Yeah.
Okay, we're down to the top 3. So number 3 for me is Land of a Thousand Nights from Strange Universe. If you only lived for the first note that comes in on that song, that high screaming held note, it's one of those iconic moments in rock. I mean, I can count them on one hand, the iconic moments, you know, Roger Daltrey's scream, that note from Frank, you know, some of Hendrix's wild notes, and Buck Dharma, dominant submission, when the solo comes in, that first note is so unexpected, it just takes you aback. But that whole song is Frank at his psychedelic best, at his Hendrixy best, and screaming tone just blows you out of your seat. You need a good stereo for that song. That's it. Land of a Thousand Nights, Strange Universe.
How
Nice.
did I forget that in my list? Damn. Good choice.
It's a
Mike.
runner-up. It's a runner-up. Yeah.
Honorable mention right there.
Right. Okay, so number 3 for me, I go to the Juggernaut album, and my choice here is Stories of a Hero. What an amazingly powerful song, strong lyrical imagery, you know, of course, the important message in that song as well, too. And in my opinion, I just really love how this track, you know, ebbs and flows over the course of the 8 minutes. And that's the studio version, right? So, you know, I just love the tone, the phrasing on this one, the solos, the notes are just so crisp, melodic, perfectly measured and controlled, gradually just increasing the pace, you know, to the perfect level before he just gradually solos out the song, and it's over. And it's like, it's one of those tracks where it's 8 minutes long, but you don't even realize it's 8 minutes have gone by. It's just, you're just sucked right in from the beginning, and he never lets go. Just a great track from his catalog. So that's my number 3.
Yep. I completely agree with you. And that is also my number 3.
Nice.
Everything that you said. I mean, it's amazing. And I love the slow build to it. And then he just goes berserk towards the end. I mean, it's just amazing. Frank at his, you know, crazy chops laden best. I mean, just awesome stuff. Awesome stuff.
Okay, number 2 for me has already been mentioned. It's Something's Coming Our Way. I mean, it's a relentless barrage of Frank's fury. I mean, it just doesn't stop. The absolute best version I've seen of this is something that has disappeared from YouTube, unfortunately. It was on Frank's birthday in Chicago. I forget what year exactly, but it was an amazing version. But I'm going with, obviously, the studio version off What's Next, which is just fine in my eyes. It's if you want to hear Frank doing the Frank shred thing, that's a great tune to go to.
You talking about the Colony Theater version, Mike? The one in '83?
Yeah.
Right. The one, there's a story behind that, but we don't know the actual what the deal was with that. I think that was professionally recorded and filmed and was supposed to come out, but something happened there. So
there are other tracks from that show still available on YouTube.
Right.
You see the time mark and all that stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there was something that was supposed to happen with that.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Cool. All right.
Number 2. Okay, here we go. Tales of the Unexpected, the album, the title track. An 8 minute like instrumental tour de force. It has 2 like very different sounding solos in this one. The main you know, lead intro is just this there's a wild kind of beat laid down by Jimmy, and you know, they get these throbbing sort of synth sounds in the back, and Frank just explodes into this like wickedly, it's almost like a violent solo that he does. And you know, it breaks down, you know, and there's some cool fills by Jimmy again, and then it picks up again. But when it picks up again and goes into that second solo, it's completely differently sounding. And it, you know, like you mentioned earlier, Mike, this is where the jazz chops come up. This is where Frank's, you know, it's just really, it's clean. There's just like these clean runs. It feels like jazz or bebop when he's playing this, you know, and it's just an amazing track all around. I can't tell me how many times that if I'm reaching for Frank and I want to listen to something, that one goes in and the volume goes up. I got to tell you.
Has to go up, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Before I mention my number two, I totally forgot. I was just so excited to talk about the song before. The Stories of a Hero that I picked was from the real live album, actually, not the studio version. So, but they're both amazing. But anyway, speaking of live, so my number two could be my number one at any given time. It's always been like Ryan, like you just mentioned. Sometimes you want to hear Frank and you automatically go to one track, right? For me, it's Talking About a Feeling from the Mahogany Rush Live '78 album. I mean, man, does blues shredding get any better than this? It's like, you listen to that and you're like, yeah, there's the fastest player alive in the '70s, right? Maybe even of all time. Could be him, right? It's just absolutely killer. He's soloing throughout this song. You love the rhythms going on. Dun, 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 dun. It's just awesome. And then at the end, it's Frank standing out there by himself doing this absolutely jaw-dropping, unaccompanied guitar solo that literally just peels the paint off the walls. It's just amazing. Love it. I mean, just another great track from this great live album. I absolutely think for me, that's when I want to tell anybody about who Frank Marino is. I'm like, go listen to that song and prepare to be completely wowed. So
And that album, yeah.
The whole album, right? It's not like it's a long album, right? Just go listen to the whole damn thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
All right, drum roll, Mike. You're number one.
We're down to number one. And so ever since the Agora DVD came out, my go-to song when I want to show somebody some Frank or when I want to just listen for myself is the live version of It's Begun to Rain from that DVD. I believe Ryan picked it already.
That's it. Yeah.
And it's just an amazingly constructed song. I mean, it starts off kind of whimsically, and then it goes into that standard jazz part. And then you get all kinds of furious jamming, including what I think is the closest to Dickie Betts sounding riffing in a jam setting you'll ever hear outside of Dickie Betts from Live at the Fillmore. And of course, it cycles back to the jazzy bit, and it's just an amazing song. And it's a whimsical song, but I mean, I forget how many minutes it runs. I think you said about 5 minutes. You thought the solo ran, Pete?
Yeah, that's a solo. Yeah.
I think it runs more than that because.
Oh, probably, yeah, 5+. Yeah.
The first time it showed up on YouTube was some Prague land or something. They had simply put in the solo part, starting from the jazz bit and running through almost to the end of the song. And I'm sure it runs about 8 minutes. But it's Frank at his best. I was there that night. I was with you guys at Frank's shows. I mean, Ryan and I were at the Corona Theater in Montreal, which was like a warm-up for Cleveland. I was with you at BB King's, Pete, back in the day. And I remember standing near the back with Joe Stump, of all people. And Joe was just mind-boggled at Frank's energy and his consummate professional approach to the instrument. He was amazed. And we're all amazed when we watch Frank.
Yep.
It's not just because he's Canadian. He's just one of the best damn guitarists that ever walked the planet.
I agree.
Let's not just call him a guitarist, musician, the songwriting, the vocals. It all comes together on the Agora, which shows you he's not getting older, he's getting better. And I hope there's one more tour at the end of this nonsense. So those who are watching this that have never had the pleasure of watching a 3-hour Frank barrage get a chance like we all have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. Yep. Agreed. All right. It's up to me for my number one. So you guys have already touched on this particular track. For me, it goes right up to the top. I think, Pete, when you mentioned that we were going to be doing this and make the list, it was pretty much from one down. It started with this song. It's Poppy. That's my number one. I take it from the real live version. And for me, I'm sure a lot of, Franksters and, the consummate Frank Marino Mahogany, it's just a consummate track for him in that, Mahogany Rush. Never recorded in the studio, always improvised live. A song that Frank has been doing in concert, since I think the late 70s. Which of course has these nods or tip of the hats, if you like, to, to bands like the Doors, the Allman Brothers, just that era of rock at that time that, you know, influenced Frank in the early days, the rock, acid rock. I just love how he takes the time to build the solo up. You know, he's kind of like he's feeling around, you know, in the beginning, much like you know, a horn player would approach a solo. There's like these tentative, exploratory kind of notes just before he lets loose with these amazing melodic runs. And the highlight for me in this song, and he's dabbled with it in other live in the live arena and also on studio record as well, is when he plays behind the bridge and just gets off these, you know, otherworldly sounding notes and what he does with it. And there's some great versions of Poppy out there that haven't been released that you can hear on YouTube or you can hear through various means, let's put it that way. And there's just some amazing versions. So for me, it was like Real Live or the Agora. Almost to me, like the last Poppy is probably the best Poppy. So, I mean, I really probably should have at this point then gone with the Agora. But for me, again, it came back to sort of kind of like Real Live and probably where I heard it. I know it's, you know, you talked about it, Pete. You made the double live pick where it's a little shorter, a little economical. The Real Live one falls in there somewhere halfway in between that, I think, probably around 18 minutes or something, where he does all the, you know, incorporates the crossroads. She's not there, goes back, and then goes back to the original theme. And then the Agora one is just, I don't know, what's that, 30 plus for sure. But for me, that's my number one. And if I'm ever walking around humming a track, it's that. It's like da 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 da. Dun, dun, dun. It's always, I don't, you know,
It's such a
I don't know.
neat little melody. It really
Yeah,
is.
it's just amazing. It's just an amazing track that sticks with you. So
I will say, when I was getting my list ready, I said to myself, Self, what's the one song that I think all three of us are going to have on our list? And that was the one.
there you go.
Had to be, right?
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
All right. My number one. I'm going to go back to What's Next again. Man, this solo is just absolutely killer. And I think one of you, I think, already picked this as well. Something's Coming Our Way. You know, it's either that or Talking About a Feeling for my number one. And man, I think just Something's Coming Our Way. He just throws like everything at you but the kitchen sink. Blues and hard rock and jazz and psychedelia. He's got the wah wah there, right there. That's you know, it's a given for me. It's really fast. He does some of these great bends. He does that little bit of scatting at the end, which I think is totally cool and adds so much to it. Just a great killer song that, again, another one of those tracks that's like you want to hear Frank Marino doing everything that has, or throwing out everything that he has in his arsenal. Something's Coming Our Way is one of those songs for me. So there you have it.
Great pick. Yep.
Anybody got any last minute words about Frank Marino? A little story, maybe anything you want to give to our viewers?
What do we talk about the runner-ups? Like the list of like my runner-ups is like, you know, almost like another list of 10 plus, you know, at least if we want to go there. But I mean, yeah.
Throw out some titles. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, I had like Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Maybe It's Time, Finish Line. We talked about, you know, you guys had it on your list. He's Calling was there for me as well. Heat of the Moment, Broken Heart Blues, Chains of Space, like the original, okay, but then what he did on the Agora version, when he went into that, I forget what it's called. There's Change of Space, and it's what is Space Unchained, I think, is the other section where he kind of, you know, just goes off and does it longer. I had the answer Through the Milky Way. It just ongoing. Just
There's so many, right?
yeah.
There's so many. Yeah, Mike, what do you got? You got any to throw out there?
Well, you know, you've mentioned them all. I mean, listen, you could pick almost any Frank solo and it's worthy of consideration. But what I want to say is that for guys like Ryan and I have had the chance to sit down and spend time with Frank, you'll find that he's an extremely intelligent, I'm going to guess he's Mensa material, intelligent individual that can talk about anything and everything. And it's just a pleasure to be with him and to talk with him. and to hear all of the other mountains of material he has. I don't know if we're supposed to talk about this, so you may have to edit this out, Pete, but Frank's nephew told me that when this tour does happen, it is going to be the last time that Frank tours his past catalog, that he's going to be touring again after that, but it'll be totally different, something totally different. So we have that to look forward to.
Yeah, he actually said that to me as well when I interviewed him back, God, late last year. He made mention of that.
Ryan and I have listened to some of the stuff he's got. I mean, he's got hundreds of pop tunes that he's written.
Yeah.
Loves pop music. I mean, he loves the Beatles. Frank loved the Beatles. He's got his blues album, which he doesn't call it a blues album. He says it's something other than blues, but I owed Just in Time Records a blues record, so let's call it the blues.
It's good. That's going to be Frank's version of the blues, which won't be your, I hate to say like your typical Stevie Ray Vaughan kind of blues, but it's not going to be something like that. It's more like, from what he said, I hope he doesn't mind me saying it, but I mean, it's going to be more like a Dr. John type of blues. So kind of like, if you know Dr. John and his type of, that kind of New Orleans kind of sound. I think he's been talking about it for a while. I don't know if it'll ever materialize, but if it did, it would be amazing. Would be actually getting a Hammond B3 player on stage with him to sort of fill out the sound. And I think that would be awesome. Whether or not that happens or not, I don't know. It remains to be seen. But yeah, like you said, Mike, sometimes, the conversations that I've had recently with Frank haven't been so much as revolving around what's coming next musically. It's more like, hey, what's going on with the PlayStation 5? He's a console kind of guy. We've had some conversations about that. We've talked about, we have deep conversations where we talk about different things too. So it's been like, but yeah, musically, hopefully there's another tour in there and there's something else, another album, whatever. I mean, he's too good to be just, hanging it up, sitting on the shelf, the music. I'm sure there's more music to come, to be heard for sure.
And Frank is getting himself into the best shape of his life. He's working out. He's seeing a physiotherapist for his back and shoulder issues. He stopped smoking quite some time ago. These are all good things and things to look forward, because Frank had plenty of energy with all his ailments on stage at the Agora. So I just love to see him one more time.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully this tour that got kind of postponed due to COVID happens in 2021. We'll kind of see how that goes. But I think even past that, Frank's got a lot more stuff up his sleeve based on things he said and stuff that he's been working on. So we're all looking forward to it. So I want to thank both Mike and Ryan for joining me here today on this very fun episode of Talking Frank Marino Guitar Solos. For everybody watching, name some of your favorite solos from all the various Frank songs in the comments below. And remember, there's no right or wrong answer here. We all hear what we hear and love what we love, but I think we can all agree in this instance, basically every guitar solo this guy has ever done is pretty damn special. So visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. For Mike Blackburn and Ryan Sparks, I am Pete Pardo. Good night, everybody.
Bye, Pete.